We need to be brave enough to look at the tough times we've been through and go, what is the opportunity here? What do we want in our workplace that's going to make us the most effective for the future? Or are we all going to be afraid, not talk about it, and slip back into the toxic ways that have always been there?
What's going on, guys? It's Yahavy David, St. Clair Speaks. You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I'm your host, Yahavy St. Clair. Guys, we are sitting with another incredible guest, impacting lives through the mental health industry. Guys, there's never been a time than right now to literally listen and stream this episode of the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Based off the last year, we've all been going through it mentally. And this is the perfect episode for you to find clarity, take notes, and find what could work for you mentally. Guys, I am sitting down with Petra Velzeboer, CEO of Petra Velzeboer. Sorry, Petra, I'm like butchering already. CEO of Petra Velzeboer. She supports businesses to create substantial mental health strategies, right? She's also a mental health consultant and adversity to advantage podcast host and also a TEDx speaker. Super excited, Petra. I want to welcome you on to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Please, you could mentally or physically jab me in the face for butchering your name for that second. Please give our listeners and our audience a 2 to 3 minute introduction on yourself, your brand, your business, and what brings you onto the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So like you said, I'm a mental health consultant. I run my own business. We do training, development, essentially trying to help bring the human back into the workplace. So where there's often this distance of, you know, like here's where we do the tasks and where we focus on the stuff. And over there, you can go have your challenges because of the pandemic or your toddlers or your divorces or your life stuff. But as the pandemic has taught us, like it's all merged together now. It's like we've got to bring our whole selves to work. There's this crossover point. So we help businesses to effectively create what we call psychological safety. So how do we have these real conversations in the workplace? But then crucially, how do we understand that that actually enhances productivity? It enhances, you know, talent retention, the bottom line of your business, productivity, a whole host of things. Now, the mental health topic is super important to me. I'm a psychotherapist and coach by background, but also it's affected me personally. So I grew up in a religious cult. I didn't go to school as a kid. And it led me to a point in my life of, you know, addiction, depression, suicidal ideation, and a whole host of things that it kind of meant that I had to learn how to do this stuff myself first. So many times when we're passionate about something, we got to, like, we're the guinea pigs, right? It's like, why is it important? And then we get it. And then we're like, oh my God, I've got to share this with people. So it's coming from both sides. That gives you a little flavor of what we do.
That introduction, number one, that introduction was fire, right? There's a lot to unpack, and there's so many different ways I could kind of like go with this. So let's swing back. You mentioned before you got into this industry, you know, you have a background. You mentioned cult, but you also mentioned bringing back the human in the workplace. That is a very powerful point. We could have a full-on hour discussion on that itself, but like kind of like break this down for us. How did you get to this point in detail, to the point where you're actually having that conversation with these corporations and you know, you're making the uncomfortable comfortable, if you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I love how you put that. It is making, but it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Once you get over a few of the fears and the what ifs and, oh my God, we're bringing this conversation up, it actually doesn't have to be uncomfortable because, like I said, it's just humans. This is the reality of what it's like to go through life, to be your best self in the workplace. Life happens. Mental health is about all of us. We all have mental health just like we have physical health, right? It's the health of our minds and our ability to do the work. So for me, I worked in lots of places. So I worked in young people's mental health. I worked in the not-for-profit sector. And then I worked in an employee assistance program. So that's where if you're in a workplace, you get this benefit, you can call up this number and it's a counselor or it's advice of some kind. And so many people don't use it, first of all. And other times it's like the tick box. It's like, well, we've got this EAP, this number. And it's like, great. But what happens in your meetings? What happens in your one-to-ones, right? But the reason I started my business was because I was working in these places, teaching other companies how to do this thing about creating a mentally healthy workforce, and they were toxic on the inside. So I'm like in this place going, what? We're teaching people this, but you just yelled at someone just disappeared, and we think they're fired, but we don't know where they are. Like all this crazy stuff. And that's what made me go, there must be a way to lead by example in doing this, in building a culture that does this so authentically that there's a ripple effect on the other businesses. And that's what I've set out to do.
Oh, let's kind of like stay on that, because there's a lot of people that take work home with them mentally, right? And then you're at the company for 10 hours a day, then you're home for maybe at most maybe 8 hours, 7 hours, depending on how long you're there, but you're taking work home with you. How do you what's that conversation like, with your clients or with these corporations on, how you're helping executives kind of like leave work at work and not take it at home? Because I strongly know this for a fact, the higher you are in these positions, the more stress and strain that you have mentally. And I'm 100% sure they're taking this home with them. And I'm 100% they're not as happy as, the paycheck is making it seem for them to be, because they're going through a lot.
Totally. Well, first of all, the higher up you go, the more incumbent it is on you to lead by example. So if you're seeing stressed out employees, if you're seeing people who are off work because of burnout, if you're seeing you're losing your talent, like all of these kind of risk factors going on, well, I would always say, let's look at your leadership level and what are their actual practices. So on the one hand, it's what's the work environment like? Is it just that much work and that stressed and you have to do it? And, and that's the culture. Or, which is often part of it, is there a personal responsibility piece? So yes, you've got work, but if you understand the principles of productivity, you know that switching off, recovery, resourcing yourself is just as important to be effective in your job. And so there is a part of like, I choose to switch off at this time because I know that when I circle back tomorrow, I'm going to be better, more creative, make sharper decisions, be better at my job, right? So there's always the organizational responsibility and the personal responsibility. And then crucially, we've got to talk about it. So I've done training with leaders and I'm like, what do you do to invest in yourself? And they're like, oh, I meditate or I do these different things. And I'm like, do any of your people know that? No, I wouldn't talk about it. And so you're missing a trick, which is if you're doing that stuff to invest in yourself, talk about it, live it, show it. And that's where you get that positive ripple effect.
Man, that is I like that point. So you would encourage them kind of more so to pull their team in and make it more so a team experience?
Talk about it, positive accountability. So I'm CEO of my company. We talk about this. We'll literally at the end, close of the meeting, go, how are you going to invest in yourself today? So we make it small and actionable. And somebody might say, I actually need to go to bed early, or I need to spend some time with my partner because my relationship's like, I haven't invested in that. Or I need to work out, man, because the stress is building up. And then we'll check in on each other. So we're on Slack. Hey, did you do that run? Did you do that thing? And I've got, as the CEO, I have to start. And so I've had meetings where I've cried in front of my people, or I've said, to be honest, I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm like, today's a bad day for it, and it's not allowing me to be my best self. So vulnerability and openness is key. And respect and psychological safety are everywhere. They're now checking in on each other. I don't have to do it the whole time. They're now doing it to each other. They're checking in on me. So it's creating this culture of support.
You touched on something, man, this is really good. So you touched on something really quick. You mentioned, hey, you're checking on people on Slack. How is that? What was it like this last, year and a half now, right? Everyone being in quarantine. How are you still building that trust in that team chemistry, operating remotely, right? We're still operating in safety, but what is that like? Was it a little difficult for you?
So we're a completely remote team. So my chief operating officer is based in New York. We've got someone in Scotland. We've got people in London, out of London. So we're spread, and we've onboarded and recruited during the pandemic. So people who we've never met. Now we've met some of them, and so where people, I think it's sometimes a cop out actually to say, well, we're remote. It's just not possible. I can't see the signs, or I don't know the body language. And I'm like, Yahavy, I could probably tell right now what kind of day you're having and ask you a few pointed questions to find out a little bit more, even though we're remote, right? So I don't buy that. But what I do say is our tactics have to switch a little bit, and your tactics have to be a little bit more explicit. So instead of this like, hey, we're going to grab coffee, I might see you in the kitchen, and like, have that organic chat. I actually have to create formal spaces in my business to have these conversations. And I have to be explicit in what I ask. So going, hey, what's the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment? It doesn't all have to be, how's your mental health? But it does have to be explicit conversations, questions about the human, not just the task. You can see, of course, I could talk about this all day. I could just monologue you and just give you a full sense of all the tactics and ways we can do it.
No, I freaking love it. I freaking love it. I love when I don't know, energy is contagious. I really, really love your energy. So I want to know a little bit, and I was kind of like reading this here briefly. That's why I kind of like went off. So can you tell me a little bit more on, your entire mission statement in terms of, you're teaching people to embrace adversity and pretty much turn their greatest weaknesses into their greatest strength.
And so that connected to the podcast that I started was really based on that personal experience. We've got all the stories of like, I hit rock bottom, it was awful, my mental health plummeted, all this stuff. But now I'm great and life's good and it's wonderful. And I'm like, all right, that's part of the story and it makes a good stage conversation. But what's the messy middle is what I'm interested in. So I'm always curious about what happens the day after you were suicidal and you made a decision or you had an epiphany to change things. What happens the next day, the week out? Like, what is the messy middle bit of change? How does that happen? And this, relates to the workplace as well. It's like, great, now we know what the problem is, management, burnout, all of these things, and we know where we want to get to. But how do we hold keep the faith in a way about the small little steps, which is like, sometimes as a manager, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to be a bit messy in being vulnerable, and it's not going to have the perfect conclusion or bow on it. I don't know what the ripple effect was yet. Oh, I'm just going to have that vulnerability hangover and be like, oh, what did I do, right? But then how do you just, in the small decisions that we make every day, check in about somebody? We just had World Mental Health Day. Great. That's a great awareness day. But that can't be enough. It's like, how am I going to talk to you today? And that's the mission, is how do we challenge people to take responsibility for their own mental health, but also for their community, whether that's personal or in the workplace.
So let me ask you this. Why do you think people aren't having this discussion with themselves, first things first, let alone with a professional or someone else?
Fear is step one. So we're afraid, we're nervous to admit that maybe we're not coping or some things, not quite right for us. Lack of awareness. So we don't understand that the small symptoms of the buildup of stress could lead to anxiety, depression, a whole host of things. So we're not very good at the prevention model, understanding what's happening. So we're very crisis driven. Once we hit a wall or we fall off a cliff or whatever that might be, then we go, oh my goodness, we need to do something, which is often what a business is doing. It's like, we've lost somebody to something like a tragedy. Now let's bring Petra and her team in to talk about it, right? So we're coming very much from a prevention perspective. How do we maintain and normalize the conversation about mental health? And you'll know the younger and younger audiences, but also people joining the workforce, they're like, hey, we've got it. Like, work has to change. And if there's any opportunity within the pandemic, it's to change the way we view work and we experience work. This is the evolution that's occurring.
Very interesting point. Now looking back, I'm 30 now, just turned 30 in July.
Happy birthday. Well
Thank
done.
you.
You got that far.
It's true. When you turn 30, your knees and your shoulders start to hurt. But when looking back at my younger years, it was evident. Now looking back, like, it was evident that I left, some jobs due to just mental health. I just wasn't there, burning out. And also the toxic workplace, right? When you're working for a manager, if you're working for a leader and they're experiencing these mental health issues, I'm not going to put anyone's business out there, but I've been in situations like that, and I had to resign immediately because it just created a toxic work environment. Can you touch on that? The importance, especially more so of the leaders in these corporate positions, that they kind of need to prioritize that more. Not saying everyone else doesn't, but they kind of need to prioritize that more on the front end, because like I said, energy is contagious, and it's easy for your team members to pick up on that, and for them to pretty much pick up on what you just pretty much put out.
100%. So environment is key. And if we want to think more generally about why are depression and anxiety like through the roof, like depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, and that was pre-pandemic. Some of that has to do with our environments, workplace, but also social media, this comparing, this like, being living in a world that isn't real and genuine and connected and human. And no wonder we're feeling lonelier than ever. Younger people are feeling lonelier than ever. And our mental health is in crisis. I resigned from a job once too, because I've experienced poor mental health. I know how precious it is and how hard it can be to build up once you've lost it, or, and I remember being in a job for 3 months, and I just thought it's going to be worse for me to be without a job for a little while. It's going to be worse for me for my mental health to suffer than to be out of job for a little while. So you need leaders to lead by example. And so everything we do is, let me get to your board level, let me get to your senior level leadership team, your partners, whatever it might be, to get them to experience this topic. Not just go, I'm going to tick off and sign it off and fine, have a bit of budget, but go HR and well-being, you guys go deal with it. But they're really truly going to get that it affects their business's bottom line. So there's a financial component to this now. If you don't invest in the prevention end, you're going to spend money on the crisis end, right? But also, how do we practice vulnerability together? Because it's not just a top down. It's like, you've got to practice it here at this level together in order to genuinely then cascade it down, if that makes sense.
No, it makes tons of sense. So you made a very good point. Would you say more corporations and companies should focus on having a firm mental health budget, so they could, have these events or have these mental health days?
And I would say we've gone past that now. So not only is it the budget and like, hey, let's do some initiatives and awareness days or benefits, but it's have a clear mental health strategy, so that you've got a clear mission for your business and where you want it to be seen in the next 3 to 5 years when it comes to the topic of mental health. Because you get that talent is going to be attracted to a mentally healthy business. And for many industries, your clients are going to be attracted to a mentally healthy business. So it's budget, it's strategy, a strategic approach, and having a dedicated person whose job this is in your business, rather than what we often see is, oh, you're HR, take on the mental health agenda as well. And often they're like, I haven't had any training in this. Why is it my job, right? So those are the 3 bits to create a sustainable approach. But then start where you're at. So if you're at the awareness day level, great, do that. I'm never going to put somebody down for starting where they're at if it's a tick box, but that can't be where it stays. We want to build from there.
It's so, man, I'm loving this right now, because I remember, and you see this all the time in the news, someone gets fired, they get let go, then they come back, and, they're not coming back for good reasons, right? They're coming back to, take revenge. And it's unfortunate that it gets to that point, and there's no discussion leading up to that. Like, there's no red flags being shown, right? So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I personally feel, a lot of this could be avoided just by, as you talked about, right, having these systems in place.
It could be avoided. So much could be avoided. But just imagine, like, if you took some time off sick, so you broke your leg, you had a sports injury or an accident, and you went and whatever, you come back into the office and people are like, hey, how's your leg? How's this? How's that? How long's recovery? Can I help you up the stairs? Like stuff like that. To say the same person takes some time off for depression. So they've been off for 2 weeks because they've had a massive depressive episode. They return to work, and now everybody like steps back and like doesn't talk to them for a while. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Let's not broach the subject, right? So that this person is now coming back into a situation. They feel more judged. It's not inclusive, and everyone's just awkward trying to prevent somebody from feeling a certain way. But that's like a little example of where we want to get to a world where physical health and mental health are then treated the same. And it would be okay for me to say, hey, how are things going for you since your depressive episode? Like, is there anything I can do to support you? Right? So a lot of this stuff, prevention is having regular conversations with people about how they're doing, how fulfilled they are, what's going on in their life that could prevent them from being their best selves at work, and then seeing what organizational bits could support that responsibility. But crucially, what can that person do? So the simple act of listening, you don't have to fix the situation, creating space for that person and empowering them to do what they need to do to support their mental health. That's what psychological safety is.
As a as a TEDx speaker, what is the message now that you are sharing around the world more than ever?
So my TEDx was titled 3 Ways to Live the Life You Want. And one of the key components in it was about practicing bravery. And I feel like we're a world of sheep in a way, people who are scared, people who are following the masses, people are doing whatever they're told. And actually it's connecting into your soul. Like, what is it that makes you, you? What allows you to kind of light up and be the gift that you were meant to be in the world? And I bring it down to practicing bravery every day, practicing courage. And that could be having a conversation, putting yourself out there, being the best parent you could be. This isn't perfection, but it's the bravery piece that allows you to push out of your comfort zone. And this is what we need more of from our leaders within the workplace. We need to be brave enough to look at the tough times we've been through and go, what is the opportunity here? What do we want in our workplace that's going to make us the most effective for the future? Or are we all going to be afraid, not talk about it, and slip back into the toxic ways that have always been there, right? So I think that's my key message.
It's a very powerful message. We're in the fourth quarter, right? We're going into closeout. We're going into another year. What would you say should be, the goals and expectations companies and corporations could set? Because when you look around, and it's very hard not to look around the world right now, because everywhere I look now, it's chaos here, it's chaos there, it's chaos in your business, right? And what should be the initiative going forward? Because I'm pretty sure it's been very tough on business owners, been very tough on employees personally and professionally. What should the focus be? Should it be more personal mental health days? Should it be more conversations, more workshops? What would you say? Because you mentioned something, and I kind of want to swing back. You said this very early in the interview. If you put more time, pretty much, I'm kind of like reiterating what you said, it's going to lead to better productivity, right? Better results, more revenue, of course. That's what everyone's in business for, right? To make more money. So what would you say on that?
So people first. So if you're going to say, what should people focus on to be effective as we move into 2022, focus on your people first. And depending on where you're at, that looks like workshops and training for your managers and leaders. It looks like getting that strategy piece in place. And it looks like making this an agenda item at board level. So right from the top, this isn't like a side thing in the D&I world or in HR. This is like right from the top, and you've got budget and people to execute on it. But yeah, the return on investment of investing in your people is immeasurable, and there's loads of ways to measure it. But it's huge. Like if you even look at the research behind the 4-day work week, for example, there's a book called Shorter that's all about like the evidence around productivity and actually less time. That's more focused time, and productivity, profits, all of these things go up in this conversation, right? I think the US is probably a long way off of executing any of that. But however, it just shows in that micro way about just reducing a day. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? Because you think the more hours we put in, the more we'll do. But actually, all the evidence suggests that you have a certain finite amount of real productive, creative hours, and the rest is often a bit scattergun, right? And it's not as productive and effective as possible. So this is where those conversations about how do we want to be our best selves and how do we support each other? Everybody's complaint is time. And I challenge that. I challenge the time complaint because I think it's about openness and productivity in a way that's sustainable over a long period of time. That's what we want to focus on.
Man, you make a good point, because I was literally just watching a YouTube video about this yesterday on, just waking up early. You have higher production. And this is something that I was doing during the pandemic. I was waking up every day, coming right here. I got my table, got my backdrop, my camera over here, every day, 3:30 a.m. And by 8 o'clock, I'm like, okay, my day's done. And I watched this video. This was about maybe a couple of weeks ago. And this is something that they do in China. It's called the 966 strategy. They work 9 to 6, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, straight. Like they come home, they're still working. And I just think it's insane. But it's effective for them. But I just think that is a little crazy. And you touched on something. You don't necessarily need to work a 10-hour shift to be efficient. In fact, now looking back at it as a personal trainer, I was working these jobs and I was constantly go, client after client after client, 10-hour days. And I'm like, man, I feel dead. Versus these 4-hour days, it shows me I could be very efficient within an hour time block by prioritizing what's more important, right? So I like to tackle my hard task as early as I can. I do a podcast interview right in this time block, midday for me. And I just kind of like go from there, and it's been working. But no, you touched on a very good point. I definitely don't think working these 10, 12-hour days is necessary.
And also with hybrid working or remote working, which some companies are still doing, people are talking about tracking software and making sure people are being effective and micromanage. But actually the reverse is true, that if you trust your people, that it's about outcomes, not time. So you can have us entrepreneurial types, we can be so effective in short amounts of time. But when you put us in a 9-to-5 situation where, well, you just got to stay in the office, right? We just kind of lose, we lose our mojo. We're just a bit like, oh, now I'm bored, and we're just filling time because they've told us to have a bum on a seat, right? So you actually diminish creativity when you're like, you have to fit this one model, right? So I think it's that trust piece, and it's measuring based on outcomes rather than time. That's the new world of work.
Thank you for streaming this episode of the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. Don't forget to visit StclairSpeaks.com and order your copy of my first book, Sweats to Suits, available now in Kindle and paperback edition. If you want to be my next guest, or my next guest, give me a referral, and I will sponsor your business in an ad segment just like this. Visit StclairSpeaks.com and learn more about the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast proposal. It's that time.
You said the T word, trust. Yeah, trust is big. And that's where kind of like micromanaging comes into play. People micromanage because there's no trust factor there. How do you build trust with your team? I think that's a really good question for you.
So we create space for conversations about just us as people, and I don't come up with it all and tell them how we're going to build trust. I go, hey guys, we want this to be fulfilling and great for everybody. What are some of the things that will help you to feel that way? And we test and we iterate and then we review and we do something else, right? So for example, Monday mornings, we have a team check-in, and that's just what's going on for you? Who do you need to be? What do you need to be your best self? How can we support you? We're not talking about tasks. We're just doing a check-in like that. In our weekly team meeting, we rotate doing what we call a values exercise. So one person, it's not just me, somebody might say, let's do a 3-minute meditation together, right? Somebody else might say, what's one thing you're grateful for? This is normalizing conversations about good mental health, not just who's depressed today, right? It's that tone of voice and that like, what's hard? It's like positive psychology, but we're always thinking about what are the ways that we can support each other. And then it's featured in our performance reviews. So within our values and about how we show up, mental health is a question in there, and we support each other with it. And then that positive accountability. So when we close out a meeting, what's one thing you can do to invest in yourself? Personal responsibility, but we've got the community piece and the connection piece. The second biggest and most important thing that's happening in workplaces, one is well-being now, it's becoming crucial. The second is belonging. So in this world of like fractious, remote, everyone's just working, burnout, whatever, that's going to be the big buzz for 2022 is how do we encourage community and belonging? Because all the science suggests that's great for our mental health, and we're lonelier and more disparate than ever.
You know what you're doing? Like you're number one. I got to give you all the credit because I was on coffee right prior to this interview, and I'm more fired up now just talking to you. You like, if I did not look at your background whatsoever, I would be like, wow, you specialize in leadership development, because it's just like, that's my biggest takeaway, like the mental health stuff as well. But in terms of leadership development, you're touching on a lot of leadership stuff. And can you touch on that for us? Like, in terms of just what leadership means to you? How did you kind of like create this executive presence is what I'm trying to say, because you definitely have that.
Thank you. And you're right, leadership and mental health cross over, because mental health is about how you show up as a person, right? How do you invest in yourself? How do you connect with others? Leadership, I love Simon Sinek's work about servant leadership and supporting that collaborative approach. I love Brené Brown's work around vulnerability and showing up as a leader. Her book, Dare to Lead, an amazing, should be a must read for people. Self-awareness. So when I know what triggers me and what's going on for me, I can more effectively model and communicate with others what's going on and support their self-awareness. So yeah, all our leadership training, which we do as well, is about emotional intelligence. It's about empathy, active listening. But again, that's, people don't understand. That's what creating a mentally healthy culture is. It's creating space for seeing how people are feeling and putting in systems and processes to help people feel good. Like, imagine to your listeners, imagine if work was good for your mental health. You went to work and you felt energized and good. And it was like, that was the best day ever. Like, my mental health is on point because I went to work, right? Right? I can see your face. People can't see your face.
I'm like, what? Said any? No one ever. I don't ever remember hearing that, unless it's your dream.
My team say it. My team
really?
say it.
See, that's what I'm saying. Yep. You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's like, this was literally my next question. I'm like, okay, would you say, because based on my personal experience, being a manager does not make you a great leader, right? Nope. So can you touch on that? Because I would be, and this is why I say energy is contagious, I would be fired up working for you. That's something I could see, because you have great leadership qualities, but not every manager has that. Why is that?
Oh, I'll tell you why. Because you get promoted because you've been at the company long enough, or you're an expert in a field, in an area. So logically, you now get promoted. That doesn't mean you have any people skills. That doesn't mean you've had any kind of coaching or self-awareness or anything. So now you're the expert in the department, but you now have these people, and this is where all the problems sort of happen. So I just think any person who's being promoted into, now I'm looking after other people, has to have some kind of training and development, not only on people management, but on self-awareness, because it's like, how is my energy contagious? What are the things that I do, my behaviors, that are going to impact my team and have a ripple effect on clients and on the business? So yeah, that's where I'd come from.
But yeah, that's, you, again, you make a very good point. That's probably the reason why your employees feel the way they do, because they literally work for you. They work for someone that, and you're literally touching on those points. You hit all those points. These other managers don't. So it's very, like, if you're not hitting those points, I'm definitely going to be miserable, working for you. I'm going to be watching the clock as soon as I clock in. And that's literally the worst job you could ever have. It's like the second you clock in, all you're doing is watching the clock.
Awful.
It's terrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Right. But it happens a lot.
So much.
And there's also, as employees too, there's no self-awareness when you're in the workplace. You're just there for the check, and like, you're sacrificing your own mental well-being to work $15 an hour. And it's really not worth it. There's no amount of money that's worth my mental health. There's none. I've been there, done that sacrifice, and I regret it too. I regret it, because the amount of work that I had to do afterwards of sacrificing my mental health for a check, it just stunted my growth. It's just not worth it. Can you touch on that? Because I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but can you touch on that, please?
Well, it takes up to 2 years to recover from burnout. 2 years. So are you ready to like get to that point and then have 2 years where you may have to live on benefits, you may not be employable, you're working on both your physical and your mental health. People don't understand that mental and physical health are connected. How many people are, have physical health conditions, back pain, headaches, sore this, diabetes? Like, if you look at some of Dr. Gabor Mate's work, he talks about most, like 99% of physical illnesses have a source within stress. So that negative stress building up. And so we stop because we have cancer or, things are coming out for us. But I mean, this isn't just people don't understand the connection between mental and physical health, and that your body is often telling you that something's not healthy for you long before your brain is, right? Different people have different sides of it. But people don't know that there are other ways to live. And this comes down to the system of conditioning from parents, from the education system, from all the media around you going, this is the path, this is the right way to go. You can't veer off of it. Like I've had people go, I can't quit this job because I haven't been here for 3 years. And it's going to look bad on my resume if I've not been in a place for 3 years. And I'm like, you want to do this to yourself for 3 years? Like in this day and age, entrepreneurship, like there's so many different ways to earn a living, right? That we need to step outside of ourselves long enough to reflect, zoom out on our lives and go, okay, in 5 years, if I continue to live this way, what's going to happen? And in 5 years, if I took the risk to do something different, where might my life be? And people don't maybe have the tools or the skills to do that work and to kind of ask themselves the difficult questions.
You want to know the truth? People are lazy. People are lazy, and I'm going to call it.
Well, they're lazy. They're lazy and afraid.
That the afraid part too. The reason why I say that is because I'm working with 2 clients as a personal trainer. There's 2 clients that I'm working with. One is battling with depression, but he's getting better, and we've been working together for the last 4 months now. And another client that recently started, she's battling chemo and just got out the hospital, and she's just an absolute rock star. These 2 individuals have inspired me to do much more with what they're going through, especially my other client that's battling chemo, just showing up, like literally just got out the hospital, wants to do boxing. And we literally just did this the other day. And I don't know, energy is contagious, but when you see someone literally going through that, literally fighting for their life, and they're showing up for personal training sessions because they want to be there, they want to do that. I had to shave her head, right? Literally showing up, sweating. And there are people out here that feel 100% that won't even go that extra mile for themselves. I have no sympathy for anyone. I've learned something from working with these clients. They've inspired me to do more, but actually show up and smile, because there is always someone that has it worse than you. There's always someone that's battling for good health. And it's just man, I have a lot of empathy, especially for my clients, but oh man, this.
Well, I just love
touched me.
But it's a beautiful example of what actually a personal trainer, the connection between physical health and mental health. And I remember getting a PT when I was in the middle of an awful divorce. And I was like, I can either wait till I'm divorced and everything's, and then work on my body and invest in myself, or I'm in it. And so these people with I so much respect, right? But I remember being tearful, my PT was going 1 more rep and do this and do that. And I was like, I was tears streaming down my face, and I was, and I was honest with him. I was like, this shit's going down, right? And if people understood that there's every opportunity, a PT, a manager, a friend, an employee, a colleague, to have those connection points, we could all support each other to kind of lift the standard of what's possible, right? So that's what I mean by that positive accountability. But beautiful, respect to those people.
Oh man. Feeling
it.
No, I'm definitely feeling it because, again, I've been there, but when you have literally someone in front of you that's literally fighting for their life to be here, and then there's people that feel 100% and they're not doing, it's so hard for me to feel sorry for someone when you have all this opportunity, you have great health, and there's someone that's on a hospital bed fighting for their life, and you're literally making excuses. I literally have no sympathy for you. I have none. And it's straightforward. And there's some people, honestly, and I'm pretty sure you could touch on this too. There are some people that like that. They love feeling sorry for themselves. They love soaking in their own sorrows because they get this attention. And once they see that they can get this attention, they can kind of leverage that. Ooh, throw me a parade, a boohoo party. And I'm just sick of it. Can you touch on that? Because I'm pretty sure in the mental health space, You've experienced people like that too. They know what to do. They know how to do it. You've had so many different meetings with them, yet they still rather just soak in their own sorrow. Can you touch on that?
Well, that's a bit radical to say, but some people do get attached to their mental health label. Oh, I've got anxiety, I can't go out. I've got depression, I can't do this. And that's not to say that sometimes clinical depression will take you to a dark place and there may be a period of time where you can't do anything, you can't get out of bed, right? But then you'll come up again. And that's when there's the habits that we can put in place to change things. Now, I know about this intimately because I was in victim mode when I was in my early 20s. I was drinking heavily. I grew up in a cult. I didn't go to school. I now had a kid. I was just like, my life is over, right? But this is the interesting thing. I would seek out the people unconsciously, but I would seek out the people that would reinforce that it was okay to live this way. So I would be in like, oh, this happened and it's so hard and blah, blah, blah. But it wouldn't be the people that were on their A game who might challenge me. It would be the people that are like, oh yeah, of course, that's hard. Let's all collude together in how hard life is. And I think we do that unconsciously. We search out the people who are in a similar wavelength, and then we go, see, and in our minds, we get to reinforce that it's fine. Also the self-care bit, when self-care is used as an excuse mechanism to not do the things to invest in your mental health. You deserve another cake or to watch some TV. Life's hard, you deserve it. Now, I'm all for self-care and investing in ourselves, but I think we can sometimes use some of this lingo to be like, well, I'm just looking after myself. Netflix, hour 10, Ben and Jerry's, tub 2, you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is what I mean about personal responsibility.
A lot of self-sabotage. Yeah.
So much.
It's a lot of self-sabotage, and subconsciously we're not paying attention to it. It's very easy to get caught up on Netflix and watching a whole bunch of Squid Games and, and you're going down that rabbit hole. But it's very, I don't know, it's very easy. So touch on this. So we've been going through this global pandemic, and I'm so tired of talking about it, honestly. I'm to the point where it's like, I'm really sick of it, but there's just a lot, and like I'm glad that we get to kind of like go through this era and kind of like live through this in the next 20 years. It's going to be quite the story, by the way. It's definitely going to be a documentary about this entire pandemic. I'm 1,000% sure.
For sure.
There's just been a lot of talk especially in the mental health space. There's a lot of talk with the vaccine. Then some people are coming out of work. They're working from home. There's just a lot. Then there's the riots. Then there's things that's going on out. There's politics too, which is a whole nother discussion. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because after this last year, I just don't even know what to say anymore. But there's just so much going around the world. How would you suggest someone to turn off the blinders? Because one of the things that I do is I don't check my phone for the first hour, and for the last few hours, say maybe 9:30 and after, I don't touch my phone. But how do you cut off those blinders from the outside world? Because I'll be honest with you, the noise from the outside world has gotten louder. It's much louder than it was 6 months ago. Why is that? One, and two, how do you turn that off?
So it's tough, and it is louder, and that is making it tough. But finding ways to choose your influences. Now, the absence of choice is basically saying, bring it on, throw it on me, it's fine. And it's an illusion. It's an illusion to think that you can just like have all the influences banging on you from all sides, and I'm just going to be tough and resilient, and it's not going to bother me. Well, newsflash, over time, it's going to have a chipping away effect on you, and that negativity is going to seep in. It's almost impossible for it not to. So I would say check your influences, and that could be not answering your phone like you do at certain times, but also check your news notifications. Like your body doesn't know the difference between the danger or threat of a saber-toothed tiger coming at it, fight or flight. But all of your resources leave your internal organs and go to your limbs so you can run or fight is what actually happens. It doesn't know the difference between that and a notification on your phone saying there was a bomb on the other side of the world, right? So if you're constantly in that bing, bing, bing going on, it's actually is having a negative impact on both your physical and mental health over time. So check those notifications. Check who you're following on your social media. Are they people that lift you up and feel like, hey, what's possible? Or is it all of the news that brings you down and like makes you want to compare and think that your life's not great? So there's a whole host of choices that you can make within that. But then not only empty out and say no to something, the second step, in my opinion, is make some conscious choices about filling your mind with uplifting things, whether that's music, whether that's podcasts, whether that's whatever it might be that fills, whether it's learning. I'm going to learn something and fill my brain with something useful, right? So like we have a choice about what we allow into our brain. And for the bits that there's noise and maybe you're saying, well, I have a job where I have to listen to the news. Well, consciously choose when you watch it, because it's generally on repeat all day, the same old shit, right? So it's like, I'm going to watch it at 8 p.m. and that's going to be my one time. And then I'm going to shake it off in some way. Like literally, burnout is the buildup of stress in our body that we don't shake out physically. It's not a cognitive thing. It's a physical thing. So all the science behind burnout is that run, that movement, like dance to your favorite song in your kitchen. Like that is the science behind preventing burnout. And again, I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about this all day because this was good. I mean, look, literally from start to finish, like we did not cool off. And you touched on something about in regard to social media. Social media detoxing is one of the things that it's become my thing recently. The last 2 years, I've done something where, like I said, no Instagram for 30 days. I'm so much happier. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, so much happier. When I'm off of these platforms, I just see the routine in my day change, the moods, and I'm like, wow, I'm getting way more done. I did not know, and we definitely don't pay attention to this, how much time we waste scrolling up and down.
So much.
I have my iPhone telling me, my exact screen time. And ever since I got in the Clubhouse platform, my screen time has been up because I'm always on the platform. But I started to really pay attention to where my energy and focus goes on these platforms. That's why I like LinkedIn. I think it's worth it. Instagram and Facebook is a complete waste of time because I'm scrolling up and down. The people that follow or engage with me are people from school, and you kind of know how it goes with that.
Yeah.
But in that sort, I'm like, man, I did something. Again, this is something I've been doing for the last 2 years, where there's times where I'm like, okay, enough's enough. It's time for me to lock in, get into that fourth quarter or Mamba mentality. No Instagram, no LinkedIn, no Facebook, and I kind of just block everything off. And I feel good. Then I get back on the platform. I'm like, man, I should have done this entire time. Can you touch on, and probably this is going to be my last question for you, but can you touch on the importance of going on a social media detox for your own mental well-being?
I think it's crucial, and I would not say I'm the poster child for this because I'm 13 years sober, and so addiction is kind of in my genetic code. It's tough for me to completely zone out, but it's what's purposeful. I'm not on Facebook, you know what I mean? For business, it's being conscious about what is actually useful for me as a person and for me as a business, if that's what you do. So it's those choices. And then, I think basically it can take, I don't know about you, but you go on holiday after a stressful time and it takes 3 or 4 days for your nervous system to actually acclimatize to like, oh, nature, air, to slow down from city kind of hustle and work hustle and all of that. And so that's where the detox is useful because it's not great. You don't do it at night. That's probably going to help you sleep, but your nervous system is not going to recover. It actually takes longer for your nervous system to come down and you go, oh, I didn't even know how tense I was until I was 4 days into this and I'm actually breathing. You know what I mean? So this is where, and I always say it's not one size fits all. So when it comes to your mental health, there's so much noise even about your mental health. Do this, meditate, do this, right? So I think even from that perspective, it's like one small thing. What's one small thing that you can focus on today, this month, and build from there? That's how we build mental strength and resilience, right?
Whew, this was fire. I really, I actually, it's so crazy. I love when I do an interview and it goes way better than the expectations I set. your energy, man. Oh my gosh. I'm in awe, but I'm also going to be looking at my self-care routine. You know, a lot of there was a lot said during this interview that I'm definitely going to write down on my whiteboard and say, okay, this is going to be my mental health routine. This is what's going to work for me going forward. And you know, you talked about even working out and meditating and doing all these things. I definitely think a lot of people should prioritize these things. And easier said than done. And this is something I'm definitely going to implement for myself because, man, there was a lot of good takeaways here. Please let us know, tell the listeners, where can we catch up with you? Shout out your social media, your websites. Do you have any books or any courses that you want us to also check out as well?
Sure. So check out my TEDx, 3 Ways to Live the Life You Want. So if you want some more tips on that one, obviously YouTube. My website is my name, petravelzeboer.com, and LinkedIn is my happy place. So I put loads of content around workplace tips, leadership tips, like how do we do this in the workplace? So if you're in that space and you want some tips there, then connect with me there and just, yeah, find me, connect. I love having these conversations. So, and I hope just one small thing has helped somebody. And no, like, this is my final piece of advice is like every 3 months or so, or when the world changes, we need to review our mental health plan for ourselves. So it's like hybrid working. Shit, now I'm in the house and, you know, I don't have the boundary between this and this. I need to adjust and adapt to this time. Now, if you're back in the office or you're doing a bit of both, like just take that hour, go to a cafe, like jot stuff down, be like, what's useful for me now? And as things change again, reflect and revisit, because this stuff gets old and we forget about it. But that's my final advice, I would say.
Oh man, this was great. Aren't you glad that we connected? Aren't you
I'm
glad?
so glad.
Yeah, aren't you glad? I believe it was LinkedIn. Shout outs to LinkedIn. What a great platform. All right, guys. So don't forget, you could stream this episode on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Audible, iHeartRadio, Overcast, and Breaker. This is the St. Clair Speak Show. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Like always, I'm out. Peace.